Welcome to our latest episode of Flight Pass, where today I'm joined with Mark Gmach, a UW Whitewater alum who brings his professional experience into teaching here at UW Whitewater. So, Mark, thank you for joining us today.
It's a privilege. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Maybe to start this off, can you share your journey from UW Whitewater back to UW Whitewater?
Andy, it's really interesting. When I graduated from here, I kind of had a fuzzy vision for what the future would be like, right? I feel so indebted to Whitewater. It launched me into my career. I met my wife here, my amazing wife here, my senior year. I think about my family. I think about all the things that happened because of that start at Whitewater. And, when I went into the industry, I went to Northwestern Mutual in downtown Milwaukee, and I was in the field working with clients. And I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to start. But I also had some great mentors along the way. So I learned a lot about leadership development. We had really good results. So they asked me to come to the home office, to headquarters. And in that capacity, I played a number of different roles over a 35-year period, but everything from recruiting to training to overseeing the southern region of the United States. But I learned a lot of valuable lessons. And when I was in the training area of the company about 25 years ago, I said, I want to get my master's degree because at some point when I retire, I want to teach. And so I knew that. So I got my master's degree at that point. And I thought it'd just be good because of the role that I'm in. And obviously, you always have to be green and growing. So I got my master's degree. And after 35 years, I retired. And I thought, all right, I'm not one to play a lot of golf. I like it. But I said, what's next? And so I wanted to teach. So I knew a professor here, Gene Taboyak, and he was at Northwestern Mutual before. And I said, don't be surprised if I follow you in 10 years. And he introduced me, and they said, we'd love to have you. So that's how I came back. And I thought if there's an opportunity to give back and help take the mystery out of career opportunities and what I've learned with the students, it would be very, very fulfilling. So that was one of the things I did. And, I got involved recently with the foundation as well because I feel indebted to the organization. So it's been really a great journey, and I have loved it. I didn't know what it would be like, Andy, working with 18 to 22-year-olds after working with executives, but they're just trying to figure out life. So it's been very, very rewarding. So I've loved it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That sounds quite interesting. And after having spent so much time and probably having some tremendous experience working at Northwestern Mutual, how did that shift to international, I guess, or how did you bridge that into moving what I presume is a lot of domestic type of work
It was
to
domestic.
international?
It was domestic, exactly. And we did studies. When I was in the home office, we did studies about should we enter these various markets. And we ultimately concluded as an organization that the market was vast enough in the United States and we had underpenetration in so many markets that wasn't necessarily the right time. But when I retired, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to teach, and I wanted to be a subject matter expert to the industry based on my experiences. So I reached out to FinSecA, which stands for Financial Security for All, based out of Washington, D.C. And they're really lobbyists, for laws and regulations for the financial services industry. But I also reached out to, there's a development branch of FinSecA. And they said, oh my gosh, we'd love to have you and work with leaders domestically. So I started working with leaders domestically, and then that pivoted. They have a branch called Gmach Global, General Agents Managers Association Global, right? That's their brand internationally. Domestically, it's FinSecA, Financial Security for All. And so they asked me to start working with leaders internationally. So I've done that virtually. I've done that in person. I've worked with Lebanon, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, just a host of countries, a host of leaders, and it's been fascinating. So I didn't know how my experience would bridge, but I learned my experience bridged well, and it's been very gratifying.
That's great. Are there any surprises that you had from working from primarily in the United States to going abroad?
I just was wondering the business model. I was wondering how do we do things in language? So that my very first trip, I went to Thailand and I worked with a company called AIA, and they're one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And they have 15 different countries. And they wanted me to work with 175 leaders from 15 different countries. I thought, how is this going to work? How is this going to work? Well, what I learned is that, first of all, they do a lot in the English language. And when they don't, they have instantaneous interpreters, right? And so the organization Gamma Global gets things done and produced in language, but most things are done in English. So then it was just a question of meeting people in countries where they're at and how do you help them take the next step. So fascinating, but the people were wonderful and it was amazing experiences.
Hmm. So that's your first experience working in Thailand. Are there other surprises that you picked up along the way? I mean, if there wasn't necessarily a language barrier, were there other types of things that you had to bridge or navigate through, or some things that from your own experiences here that translated well?
Yeah, well, from my own experiences, I was amazed at how much they look to the West for best practices. So they look to the West for best practices in the industry. So as far as recruiting, development, training, mentoring, just general leadership principles as a whole, they look to the West. So what you're telling them, they're very hungry for that information. Culturally, it was just amazing. I did some studying culturally, Andy, and it's just before you go there, like, how should you interact? How should you address? So in one room, we had China, we had Egypt, we had Sri Lanka, we had Singapore, we had all these different countries. And I was stunned at how well they interacted together. So that means they had a common vision, a common mission, what they wanted to do for the clients. So they were aligned, but culturally, there were significant differences between some of the countries. So, for instance, China did not have information available to it outside of what the government would provide or allow to be provided. So other countries would kind of snicker a little bit behind what China knew and what they didn't know, although they were excellent at what they did. The other thing is I learned little things like when you accept a business card, you hold it in the four corners of the business card. You look at it, you study it. Here in the United States, we tend to jam it in our pocket, shake their hand, and talk. Here, they view it as giving a piece of themselves. So you look at it, you study it, you honor it, you give them your business card, to exchange, and then you put it close to your heart in your pocket instead of your pants pocket. Otherwise, it's an insult. So those are some of the things I learned, Andy. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd be interested in that area, but those are some of the things I picked up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think in terms of what you said about how they actually look to the West for these different type of practices, do you have a sense about why that is, as maybe from your experience?
The evolution of the industry. So Finseca, I'm going to be going to a meeting this weekend and presenting to a group, and 75% of the audience is going to be international, 25% domestic. But Finseca for years has been the go-to, and Gamma Global, the go-to development organization worldwide. And so they hear when they attend, leaders come from other countries, they hear best practices and they know that. And as you're well aware, systems run businesses, people run systems. And so you have to help them create a system for what they're trying to achieve. And oftentimes that's based on research and best practices. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, how do these international experiences influence what you bring to the classroom?
Yeah. So when I bring to the classroom before all this, and it started right around the time I started here, but I would bring domestic experience, right? Try to take the mystery. A lot of our students, not all, but a lot of them are first generation college students. And so having a role model, taking the mystery out of the business or different opportunities is critical. And that's why professional organizations are so important to their development. But, so a lot of my comments focused in on domestic originally, but as I gained international experience, bringing to the classroom, kind of giving them that worldwide perspective of how vast this industry is and how things are done in some of the different countries, I just think enriches their perspective. And I hope in a way that they get to think about what could they do. I never dreamed when I graduated from here I'd be doing the things that I'm doing right now, but I hope that planting some seeds for them to be open for global experiences down the road.
Do you see that as more of a challenge or a potentially an opportunity working with Whitewater students and kind of sharing these international experiences?
I don't think it's a challenge. I'm not sure, what the challenge would be, but it's just having them think bigger, dream big, and again, depending on where they've grown up, depending on their role models. I was fortunate; I had some great mentors along the way that really challenged me to think better, bigger, and that includes some people from Whitewater when I was a student here. But I think that those things about what's possible hopefully just lays the groundwork for some impetus for the future, so
Right. And to clarify, I don't mean in terms of an obstacle of working with students in general, but it's just more of in terms of without a big knowledge base of students that have had these type of experiences. And so it sounds like what you're saying is it's kind of challenging them and kind of pushing them further. And giving those type of experiences for students. I mean, can you maybe even draw upon your own experiences as going from someone that graduated from Whitewater to a professional career, how those type of experiences and types of skills, whether becoming uncomfortable and kind of pushing yourselves and having mentors push you, how that plays a role in the educational journey?
yeah, I try to bring that to the class as much as I can, and I got this great note from a student the other day. It was a transfer student from Ball State, and she was just she came up to me after class one day, and she said, "Mark, what you said to me on one of the first days to the group," and then she came up to me after, she said, "You challenged me to get involved in professional organizations, to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because at this point, they're used to being students, but part of the college experience is starting to spend some time bridging into what could be your profession." And she just said that was the best decision that I made getting involved in it. So I challenge them. I challenge to go to career fairs. I challenge them to get involved in their professional organizations. I challenge them to think big. I challenge them, and I try to serve as a sounding board to them where I can. But growth, and I talk to them about the times you're the most uncomfortable, when you look back in your life are the times you grew the most. And that's what I found in my career as well.
That's great, and thanks for sharing that example. What do you think? Are there things that you do differently, or teach differently, or would you explain differently to students now that you've got these international experiences? I mean, shifting some, again, drawing from a wealth of experience working domestically, going abroad. Is there things that you emphasize differently now that you're going abroad or with an international perspective?
A couple things that come to mind. First of all, different types of distribution systems. How are products distributed to solve clients' needs? The process, how does it work in different countries? How is it similar? How is it different? In Sri Lanka, it might be different than Singapore, right? And so you have the process of helping a client, the value added, the belief that you're making a difference in the client's lives, and I can share that domestically, but you can also tie those direct things into the international piece as well. And, some countries are further behind than others, right? I don't mean to pick on Sri Lanka, but, they're a little bit still more of an agricultural type society, close family knit. So, part of their challenge is having people believe in the need for some of the financial products as a whole. Now, when I was there in 2018, that was the belief. When I was there this last year, they said, that is breaking through, that working with clients is much better. That's very different than working in Singapore or Hong Kong or some of the other places where there's more sophistication. The market has evolved. So it's a fascinating thing, and it's a fascinating process. And I try to bring that to the class and give examples in different classes and different segments. But universally, how important having financial services and somebody plan, right? Because no matter what you study, Andy, you can be an expert in that area, but we all have to deal with personal finance. So we have to embrace it ourselves. But in addition to embracing it ourselves, part of that is making sure you're working with somebody that can help you be a catalyst to help you make those types of decisions.
Mm, and that's a really
And it's
interesting.
universal.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I imagine so. I'm something piqued my interest there as you're seeing that transition over time in Sri Lanka over the past few years, and have you observed maybe other differences or shifts that are happening either in countries that you've directly had experiences or maybe just in general over the past few years?
Other shifts occur in countries are really dependent on some of the succession challenges that they have. A lot of companies have older leadership in place. And so I'm working right now with the Caribbean, and I'm working with a group of high potential leaders, and we spend once a month going over topics, and then they debrief and they send in different assignments, and that's through Gamma Global. And the companies are hungry for leadership, and that is only intensifying. Some leaders are getting older. What's that next generation? How are we going to grow? And so that is really universal. The other thing is laws. Laws will vary from country to country dramatically. So, what you can do, how you can position it. I just was on the phone with Gamma Global talking about doing some work in Malaysia, but they have a big Muslim population. So, they have unique rules that I have to be aware of as far as how to engage them that might be different than some of the other countries that I've worked with. So there's nuances. It's interesting. It's not dull. It's interesting.
Yeah, I imagine so. And
Yeah.
given my own international experience too,
Yeah,
I can
you've had a
tell
lot of
that those types of nuances are really important.
yes.
But I'm kind of curious from you, it's going from, again, going from more of a domestic type of experience to this international shift. How do you find picking up these nuances? Is it something that just doing research? Reading about it online, or what are some of the best ways to capture and understand those
I
nuances?
I do research in advance, but when you have 14 countries in a room, it's not, you can only do so much. But if you're working with one country, you can do some research in advance. And one of the things that I enjoy is just building relationships with people. I mean, I love building relationships with people. And when you build relationships with people, they'll tell you things, they give you grace, they'll do different things. And so I think that that's something that I just have found, Andy, that people are people and they want to be treated with respect. They want to be embraced. They're hungry to grow. And if you treat them well and you give them a good framework to think out loud, and you're not necessarily the subject matter expert on everything, part of the genius is in the room, through their peers and learning from each other. I think that those are the things that have worked for me.
No, that's good. I mean, yeah, that's probably some great advice no matter which type of area or focus that you get into, relationships and people. Those are skills that I think resonate.
'Cause I was nervous about it first because being mainly domestic, right? How does this work? And I have found it has worked really, really well. So, yeah.
Mm, great. So, from your perspective, what does global readiness actually mean? So, if we, as our college, as a mission for this global readiness, what does that mean?
Global readiness, I think it doesn't necessarily start with the students. I think it starts with the chancellor's vision, then the dean's vision within their particular areas, depending on the opportunities that are available. So, is it part of a vision? Is it part of something you want to be intentional about versus haphazard about? And once it starts there, then are there some people that own that, can you gauge interest through the professional organizations or through the classes? How is that shared about what those possibilities might be? And if people are just interested in having a broader perspective than domestic or what their own world would be like, I think there's an opportunity to use that as a springboard to create some synergies with some other countries along the way to create those experiences.
So that's an interesting thing because you're talking about more from a strategic point of view, from the top down. Is you think maybe even from your own management experience and leadership experience, is that's something that is, I guess, resonates whether you're in an academic environment or a non-academic environment?
Yeah, vision's important, right? And vision is something that maybe 3 or 5 years and it becomes outdated and you gotta cast a new vision. So what does that look like? We're not there today, and I know we're doing things in that space, but what does that look like in 3 to 5 years? And so what are the possibilities? And get people thinking about the possibilities, and then taking a step back and saying, all right, what does a step look like in our operating plan this year to take a step closer to that? And who has ownership and what's the report back? And it's one thing to have something that's in the vision, but if it's not connected to, your operating plan and what you're going to do, it's not going to materialize. So you have to be intentional. Somebody has to own, or multiple people have to own it. And muddle their way through it because they may not have a clear definition. They know where they want to go, but what are the next steps? Muddle their way through to begin to get clarity of what the possibilities could be. So that's when I think about what you had to share. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, good. Do you have any specific examples, not from necessarily an academic environment, but from, I guess, professional experiences, as from things that you've seen where companies have done that successfully?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the company I worked with in Hong Kong this year is based out of Canada. And when I came into the industry, they were strictly a company out of Canada, right? And they did sell in the United States their products and different things. But here, when I was in Hong Kong, there were 10 or 11 different countries, Japan, China, other countries that were there. And I thought about, oh my gosh, how much this company has evolved since I came in the industry to where they are today, and the markets that they're penetrating that have not been penetrated early. So I don't know all the steps that they took to do it, but clearly they had to have a relationship. They had to have somebody take ownership in those countries and start building, and then give guidance and backup support from the headquarters. So yeah.
Now, as we're approaching the end of this, our time right here, as in all of these podcasts, what we have is our guest, for our previous guest, leaves a question for our current guest. And so at the end of our last episode, we had Dr. Mohammed Jafarinejad, and he left, yes, and he left a question that kind of shifts from that individual experience to more of an institutional ambition. And his question specifically for you is, can regional universities become global hubs for business education? And what might it take to actually make that happen?
I believe so. And again, it kind of gets back to what's the vision, who owns it, what are you going to test? Um, can you have relationships internationally where people are trying to solve the same things for their students? How do you then share common experiences with your students, whether it's competitions or joint projects that you work together? Part of that could be faculty exchanges along the way, depending on how it evolves. But could a regional, university be hub? Yes. It'd have to be beneficial and in terms of to both parties, and in addition to that, intentional, right? And you have to think about what's the impact? What's the benefit? So are the students interested in these opportunities? I think most would be to have that. That would be getting out of their comfort zone, Andy. But in addition, I know there's students on the other side that would be interested in that. And I think it's a way of marketing the university, saying we got some really unique experience. And in addition to international travel or trips or tours, here's some things we do throughout the semester to do that and build those relationships. So yes.
So, as an alum and having spent some time in industry, and now on the other side is actually delivering and talking to students and learners, What opportunities are there maybe in classes? It maybe yours or others. You mentioned competitions, types of engagements that can happen in the classroom. What type of opportunities might exist there for alums to, I guess, connect back and provide these type of experiences to for students in their in as they're taking classes?
So you're talking about alums
Yes.
providing this type of perspective to students. I think you have to find some alums that are interested in giving back. And most of the people that I've talked to in the industry are willing to come back and willing to talk to students. And they find it kind of like full circle in a lot of ways. And however, if you have an intentional approach versus a haphazard approach, part of that would be you'd be looking for alums or relationships that have had international experiences, and then making sure that they're bringing that to share that specific experience to help be a catalyst for whatever you're trying to nurture and grow along. And then they may have contacts. They may have contacts with companies that they worked with international, maybe universities, but most likely companies. And who knows? I had a student, Andy, couple semesters ago, CFP student. I teach advanced retirement financial planning is one of the courses I teach, which is a CFP approved curriculum in Capstone. And she went with a group of students to a CFP meeting in Chicago. And she went with a group of students there, and they had somebody from Ireland giving a presentation. And the CFP group that was there, they made it a big deal that they had college students sitting in the back of the room that were just observing. They thought it was the greatest thing ever. Well, she approached the speaker and she got an internship for the summer in Ireland as a result. And so those are the types of things that, if you're intentional, can be nurtured and developed.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that wraps up our time here, but I want to thank you for sharing your experiences and this knowledge about international experiences and your journey from Whitewater to Whitewater. And so from that, the journey with this podcast does continue. And so will the questions. Mark is leaving a question for our next guest, and we'll carry that forward into our next episode of Flight Pass.